But yeah, I think we'll just start by, asking what kind of got you into the nutritionist industry. And you specialize with, is it gut and thyroid?
Gut and thyroid health, yeah.
Yeah. So what brought you to your career, I guess? What's inspired you?
Yeah, so it was my own struggle, really. I was really struggling with extreme fatigue. I was just always exhausted, and I was in my 20s, so I shouldn't have been, and I knew that. Really bad mental health issues, so anxiety, no stress tolerance at all. So really difficult to just do like normal life when you're like that. Um, and multiple food sensitivities and things like that. And I just thought, I sort of tried to get help with doctors, and there just wasn't any kind of sort of trying to get to the root cause. There wasn't any of that. Like there wasn't any questioning, why is this happening? And I knew that it was happening for a reason. I just knew it. So, and then I realized that the only way I'm going to find out is if I find it out myself. So then I then went and studied. I'd already vowed I would never go back to university or tertiary education again after doing 3 years of sports science. I loved it, but it was hard in South Africa. And then I thought, no, I've got to go back and become a nutritional therapist, because it's not enough. The sports science is not, I need the nutrition. I need to understand that. And I found out that if you study nutritional therapy, you can then, it's not just about what you should and shouldn't eat. It's actually about what your body systems are doing and which body systems have gone out of alignment and have essentially stopped communicating effectively with the other body systems, and how to bring that back into homeostasis. So it turned out that actually I had an autoimmune thyroid condition going on. And I could only figure that out when we studied the gut and the thyroid and all the systems. And then I could then connect, oh, okay, this one affects this one like this. And if this goes wrong with this one, then this is how it can affect the thyroid. And if there's an issue with the gut, then that can lead to autoimmune conditions and autoimmune thyroid conditions. So then I knew where to look. So then I was like, right, okay, so I need to look at my gut health. And I then also knew what I need to ask for and which functional medicine labs I should go to and which tests I should ask for to find out. It was like a real project, you need that information to do it.
I mean, that's crazy, to be honest. I can't imagine many people in a similar situation have gone through that to need a result. Do you think the industry is kind of becoming more prominent over time, or you're kind of, you're a specialist in your field? Do you get a lot of business looking for the answers you were?
Yeah, definitely. I do get people who just are at a loss and are just a bit desperate, like I was, where, really desperate, where you just think this can't be right. I can't carry on functioning like this. And they've just kind of given up hope, because there hasn't been any interest in finding out why, and it's not random. Like, our bodies aren't random. They don't just do things for no reason. There definitely is always a reason. So I do get a lot of people coming, and I would say it's not all doom and gloom. Like, there are so many more options now. There's so many great functional medicine labs where you can get the answers, so that's the main thing. But it does just take a little bit of time. And, for me, it took quite a long time, because I was still studying, and obviously I can quickly find things out now, but it was like a lot of patience with my body and with myself and figuring it all out. So
that patience you talk about, with having a sporting background, you train and you get through stages, but there's also always something that's there that you're fighting against. It's almost like a competition with yourself, which with whatever sport you do. Did you find it frustrating when it wasn't like that? It was something that it was a puzzle you were putting together, opposed to like a goal structure, where, again, like athletes, if you practice, if you put in time, if you put in effort, if you schedule, make sure that you're putting in that utmost time to like hone your craft,
Yeah.
Was it frustrating transitioning into something that was actually a lot more complex and a lot more puzzle orientated? Because I have to admit, in our experience, that's the transition I found difficult. It wasn't straightforward as if I put in all the work, it will happen.
Exactly.
You have to sort of shake the right trees and stuff. Was that frustrating for you as well?
100%. Yeah, I did. I found it really difficult, but it, gave me some really good learnings, because I realized, okay, it's not as simple, like you said, as like you just put in all the effort, you do all the work, and then you get the result, and it seemed quite unfair at the time. But actually, what you learn is that isn't what it's like. You've got to take a step, and then you've got to listen to the feedback from your body. So you're going to take the step and then watch what happens, and you monitor closely, and then you see, okay, this happened. So now my next step is going to be this. So you inform each decision based on how your body's responding, and nobody can actually tell you exactly how an individual is going to respond. They might respond really quickly, they might respond more slowly, they might need a slightly different approach, and it's constantly tweaking and going slowly and waiting and going, oh, okay, actually, maybe that wasn't the best path. So now we have to go back again and try something else. And I found it really, really difficult. Yeah. Have to be honest, but in the end, it's been so rewarding, and I've learned so much about how you actually work with someone. It's literally about it's watching and understanding, monitoring how they are actually responding to each and every step, and that's what gives you your path to the next step and the next step, and that's what makes it so individualized.
Yeah, we found it a little bit at the start when we were trying to figure out what path we were going to take. It's comparative to sort of stepping into darkness.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've it's such a weird concept, but the idea of that, that there's a path there, but you're sort of like feeling it out as you go. Like, exactly. It's like making that next step, but you're doing it with confidence, but also a very awareness that this is new, or like there's not a lot of people around that are going to tell you you're right or wrong. You're just going to have to try to feel this out.
100%. Yeah. And it can feel quite scary, but it is like having a bit of faith in yourself, isn't it? Because if you do take that first step, then you can take another step and another step, because you start to trust yourself and your body, and you start to learn how to read the signs and listen to your body with the symptoms and feedback that it provides you. So yeah, I totally understand. Yeah.
It must be so gratifying, right? Being able to help these people out who come to you, who really feel like at the end of their line, no idea what to do next. And like your studies brought you here, where you've got the power to help them with the next process. I think that's like so amazing. Like, it's missing in my opinion, in the kind of public realm of like NHS and things like that. It's an area people quite underlook, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. It is. I can't describe how rewarding it is, especially when somebody's lived with, like intense symptoms for a long time, and it's just so heartbreaking to know that somebody's just struggling so much with so many years, and they've been led to believe that that's just like normal. So it's so nice to be able to change that whole narrative and just give people some confidence, some empowerment, and some sort of life back in themselves. It really is. I can't describe it. It's it gives so much back to me, like it's so worth it just doing the work, because it really does help. It sort of really changes things for people. So yeah.
So when a patient comes to you, what would you say the process is? Do you take tests? So, do you start with a conversation? What's your process?
Yeah, I really like starting with a conversation, actually, because I just like to, even if it's on the phone, I just like to hear the person's actual voice and hear what they're saying. And if I can hear what they're saying from them, I can start to piece together quite quickly where we need to start. If I could hear a brief history, it's not like, I'm not going to take a whole case history. I'll do that in the first consultation, but I do want to just hear a bit of the background, what the symptoms are that they're currently presenting with, and then we take it from there. And yes, I do usually, more often than not, recommend that we start with some kind of mechanism to give us some data on that person. So I don't like to just kind of take guesses about what we should do, because, you know, for different conditions, we do need to do things differently and eat differently. So I like to get at least, you know, often it will be maybe a gut microbiome test. So I get it, you know, they'll have to send off a stool sample for that, which is not the most fun thing to do. But then we get so much information back from that, which really can inform our next steps and help us to figure out what is happening inside of that person and what we need to be doing in terms of diet, supplements, lifestyle changes. So it might be that, or it might be a thyroid test, or it might be a vitamin and mineral test, or a food sensitivity test. But I would say more often than not, I would start with a gut test. But it does just depend what the person is presenting with. So I'll then go for first priority, rather than saying we must now do all of these tests at once, which I never ever would suggest. I would rather just suggest one thing that's kind of ringing alarm bells in my ears, going, okay, this is what we need to do first, and then work with that data. So I really do listen to what they're saying and all of their case history, all of their symptoms, and what they're saying when I question them on each body system. But I really do like to have some data as well. And I'll also look back on any past tests that they might have that they can share with me. There might be more basic tests that have maybe come through NHS or sort of standard sort of things, but that's fine. It can still help me to sort of piece it all together and then build on patterns, looking forward on test results and looking back. So yeah, definitely like to have some data to work with, that we can then retest and see what's changed as well, which is really helpful and motivating.
I mean, to me, that sounds like such a great idea. And if you could even bring that to, you know, everyone in need of a doctor, for example, like further treatment and things, if they could ask you these like fundamental questions, even about diet, and like you said, do like a gut biome and things like that, because that is what activates your body and makes it function. It seems like a really core thing that's like kind of overlooked, in my opinion.
100%. And I think with the gut, you know, because 75 to 80% of the immune system resides within the walls of your actual gut, of your intestines, you know, if you look at the current diseases that we face, a lot of them are, you know, they're either autoimmune, where the immune system has gone way too overzealous and too overactive and it's mistakenly attacking self, you know, it's attacking our own tissue, or it's gone the other way, where the immune system is underactive and it's not able to fight back. So if you look at the diseases we're faced with, a lot of them fall into those two camps of immune dysregulation. And obviously, with the immune system being mostly in the gut, you know, that is where we should be looking, in my opinion, because if we can see what's going on inside the gut, then we can optimize the immune system and get it functioning at its best, whether that's helping to regulate it and calm it down, if you will, or actually helping to optimize it and kind of get it firing a bit more. So yes, I really do think there should be more focus on looking at the gut microbiome.
Do you touched on the NHS there and how you would work with what they are willing to give you? Do you find it difficult to get that information, or are they very forthcoming? Or because I only say this because of our experience with their nutrition department. Do they work like closely with you, or are they very reluctant to give you information? Is it?
Yeah, I actually, what I do is I get the client I'm working with, I'll actually ask them and say, look, could you send me X, Y, and Z, you know, because they might have mentioned, I've had this test and this test. Shockingly, a lot of the time, they won't even be in possession of their own data, their own test results, which it just feels wrong to me. So I will then say, okay, you need to email your GP practice, or if it comes to that, go in and demand your results. And, you know, first just ask for them and they should just give them to you. But, you know, if there's any issue, demand your results. It's your data. So that is how I will obtain it, is I'll actually ask them to share that with them if they don't have it already. and then I'll get them to send it over to me, because I just don't think it would go well if I had to ask for it directly. And I have had cases where, I'll contact a GP practice myself and say, I'm working with this client. I'm really worried about, her iron levels. Worried about her thyroid. I'm worried about her vitamin B12, whatever the markers are. And then there sometimes will be quite a lot of resistance, because I've said, could you please test them? And then there can be, not always, some are really good, but then others can be like really resistant to just running those tests when I've given clear reasons why. So that's quite disappointing. But yeah, you just have to really push for it, or just go privately if you want to save yourself huge amounts of stress and time.
That's what we had to do in the end. There was something to do with Saskia. The CGAT clinic guys in Germany had said, hey, like, Beth's looking really great, but we'd really like these. They gave us a list, and it was like quite a specific list.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried to call in person, we tried to call up and be like, hey, we need these things tested. We were instantly shut down. No, we won't do that. Mm-hmm. I had to go in person and essentially just tell them to do their job and be like, hey, I don't care. Like, my wife is English, you are the NHS, I would like these tested in her blood. And then they did it reluctantly. Mm. And again, like, I find I feel you, because it's that frustration of just like, hey, like, you should take me seriously is very real. That's the reason I ask, because that's been our experience too. So we find this nutrition stuff has been actually the foundation of what we've built. Our 5 years on, reaching out to people like yourself and actually having a serious conversation about what it takes to fuel a human. I come from a sport background similar to yours, where we're told that you need to fuel your body because that's how you're going to get results. And that's not seen in all types of society as a factor. Yeah. When actually it's a very, very important factor.
100%. Yeah, I think we're just really losing connection with it. I just keep seeing people who are, they're really smart people, but they've lost the connection completely. They don't seem to understand that what we eat directly affects everything about us. It just seems to be this complete, like, no, that doesn't happen.
I think we're really underinformed. From when you're younger, I didn't realize how terrible sugar is for me until I went through cancer. Like, you shouldn't have to go through an experience like that to know that, because I think in a lot of cases it probably nudges it along. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to say causes it, but basic things like that we should be taught as children, not just fed sweets. And I look back and I'm like, oh, well, that's, I think I was healthy enough, but was keen on the ready meals at uni, for example, or grabbing a quick takeaway. And
well, you're not really taught otherwise as such.
Exactly. It's not fair, because you don't know. It's better, at least if you know, then you can make the choice.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it isn't okay for people to just not know what's happening when they're doing that. And of course, they're going to choose the easier options because studying, busy.
Can I ask, with your children, do you? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you're really on their diet and what they should and shouldn't be eating. Do they find it easy to go along with, or are they very much but they get to eat this and do this?
I remember, sometimes, it's really funny. I can't remember what it was the other day. My eldest, who's 8, she said to me, I heard her talking to a friend, and she went, "What? That? What is that?" I can't remember what it was now, but it's quite a common kids' food. And I was just like, oh gosh, she actually doesn't know what it is, but I was kind of quite proud at the same time. But it's been an interesting journey. All 3 of them are massive foodies. They love food. They just don't stop at all. I think that's where all my money goes, just on really high quality food and supplements, actually, for them. But they because they're so focused on everything that they love, they're chowing down on watermelon, and then they've got mango and chicken and it just everything at once. Because they've got so much good stuff, and I give them what they love, they just seemed to be really happy with that. But my eldest, I noticed quite early on that she was sensitive to dairy and gluten. I noticed that really early on. And because I have now in remission, but I do have the tendency to have Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. So that's when your immune system becomes overactive and attacks your thyroid gland. And because gluten and dairy are not great for that, as in they could even trigger Hashimoto's in a person. So obviously, because I know I've got the predisposition or the genes, I just didn't want to put that on her. Like, I didn't want her to give her something that I know could just tip her genes more that way, as in, because I know that genes can express themselves or not express themselves. Literally, we can switch them on and off. I thought, I'm not going to risk, and I'm not going to lie, it has been difficult at times, because she does go to loads of parties and she's like, she's always seeing everybody eating all this stuff. But because we did it from such a young age, straight away, really, she hasn't really known any different. And I always explained to her why, like I found ways to explain. I would say, there's all these little gut bugs, in your tummy. And when you eat like good food that's got fiber in it, that's what they eat. And then they all have this big party and they're so happy, But like, if you give them something that doesn't work for you, then it's going to make them sad. And that's going to make you feel sad. And just find ways to explain. And it's a bit of repetition. And when she's sad about it, I'll never shut her down. I'll be like, okay, let's talk about it. What happened? Okay, so somebody had a donut or a whatever, and you wanted it and you wanted to try it, and you can have it, or a Rocky Road or whatever. That's really hard. Like, I know that must feel really hard. Is it hard for you sometimes? Okay, what shall we do? Let's go find a really cool gluten and dairy free donut place, or let's make a Rocky Road ourselves, which will taste exactly the same, but it's just going to be slightly healthier and not have stuff that doesn't work for you as an individual, that doesn't work for your body. And then she's actually fine. Like, in nursery, she used to get something different, like a massive ice lolly, and they would be having ice cream and she'd be going around going, mine's bigger than yours. And I was sort of like quite proud of it. So maybe I've just been lucky. I'd say with the twins, it's a little harder. I have to manage them at parties a bit and be like, no, get your hand out of that. But, I think it's just, again, just repetition and explaining why, and not making it like some kind of punishment thing, but also just like sticking to your guns, even when it's hard. Just because everybody else is doing what they're doing, it doesn't mean you have to just be like, okay, I'm going to do it as well. Like, it isn't okay, the amount of sugar, and it's just so much, at parties and even at school. I just think you don't have to do it. Even when it's hard, you can push through and find a different way for your kids,
Yeah, definitely. For cancer, for example, could you maybe explain for us how high sugar can actually impact it, and maybe even bring it on in some cases?
Yeah. So I think the thing with sugar is it does cause our bodies to release a lot of insulin. So basically what happens is every time you eat a food or a meal that contains carbohydrates of any kind, you will have a rise in your blood sugar. It is going to rise. And then in response, your pancreas produces a hormone called insulin, which is like a cab that takes the sugar from your bloodstream into your body cells, so you can actually use the sugar for energy or to store it. But the thing is, the way that we eat now, where there's just so much sugar, and there's sugar put into things that you don't even know it's in there because they've said something else, like dextrose or something, then you have like high levels of insulin chronically, and it goes too high, it goes higher than it should. So high insulin levels have been linked to inflammation, and actually been linked to cancer as well. Just literally having that high insulin sitting there. And so that is a really big issue. And I think, a lot of people don't like to say sugar causes cancer, but when you look at the facts, cancer cells, they eat 200 times more glucose than a normal cell would. So, it kind of is really not a good idea to be having something that is what the cancer cells live and thrive on. And then especially, like I said, when you actually look at, it's not just looking at the sugar, it's looking at what happens when I eat the sugar. Oh, my insulin goes up, and high insulin is linked to cancer, heart disease, diabetes, like loads of really serious diseases. So yeah, I really think it's wise to move away from sugar, which means you also then move away from highly processed foods in the same step, which I think is really important, because when you're eating foods that are high in sugar, not only are you chronically having that insulin response, which puts you at higher risk and causes inflammation, but you also are displacing everything else that you could be eating. So you make a choice, right? If you're eating that, it means you're not eating something else that you could have eaten. And the other thing could have actually had some fiber in it, which could have actually fed your gut microbiome, which is where your immune system is, remember? So, you need to take every opportunity to feed the right systems so that they can actually work. And the gut, it does need a lot of fiber. And so if you just keep eating the easier things that are devoid of fiber and higher in sugar, especially hidden sugars, then, it's not going to be easy for the immune system to work properly and fight back should a pathogen invade.
On that note of sugar, because we've had to really look into this because you have to find things that are palatable, So if someone's going through cancer treatment, you have to be able to balance that wholeness of it being the best thing for you and still being able to enjoy food.
Yeah.
So what we've been able to straddle through research and things like that is the real difference between bad sugar and refined sugar and naturally occurring sugar. Would you be able to just explain a little bit about the differences? Because that was crazy trying to figure that out. And trying to figure out that balance in terms of, again, we're very lucky. The fact that there's heaps of organic grocers and there's a lot of alternative living here. I think it's a lot easier. Could you explain a little bit between the difference between the refined and white devil sugar and the natural sugars?
Yeah. So do you mean sort of like things like stevia and maple syrup instead of sugar, or do you mean more like naturally occurring sugars that are found in sort of like fruits and things like that?
Really?
Yeah, if you could have because we use agave, for instance, as a supplement, or xylitol, and
we used to anyway.
Well, yeah,
I used to put it in coffees and
and if I bake something for Beth, or Beth does flapjacks, we use honey as like a supplement because we found out that it breaks down better in the body. But again, if you could just touch on that because that's really, I think, where people get a lot tripped up.
Yeah, it is really confusing. I think the differences are, some of the less refined sugars can release in a different way, so they can release a little bit more slowly. I would say I would still be wary though I would still not have loads of stevia or xylitol or agave, because the body can still see it as a sugar, once it breaks it down into those more simple forms. But I do believe that that some of the other ones, like the maple syrups and the agaves and the stevias, would break down a little bit more slowly, and just some of them are not quite as sweet as well, so they might have a slightly different response, as in how much insulin you actually produce in response to that, which obviously, like I said, can be quite inflammatory if your insulin goes really high. But I think the main thing is trying to find ways to have unrefined sugar within a food, because nature is super smart like that. When you have a fruit that's got natural sugar in it, it's pumped full of polyphenols and antioxidants and fiber and enzymes that completely change the way that sugar is released in your body and slows it right down, so that you're almost protected from the negative effects of if you actually strip everything that's good in that back and just take the sugar, which is what humans are like. So yeah, I think it is about almost training your taste buds, and it sort of happens quite quickly actually over time when you just focus on all the really good stuff and all the things that you can have and experimenting with that, you sometimes, you know, a lot of my clients will just say, I just stopped. I don't really know. Like they're not sort of like, right, I'm going to stop eating sugar today. I would never sort of say that you should do that. But they go, oh, it tastes way too sweet now, you know, like my taste buds changed. And it wasn't like a punishing thing to do. It was just focusing on all the things that were in what their recommended meal plan for them and their snacks list, and just eating that and really enjoying it and sort of forgetting and then going, oh, I don't like that anymore. It's way too sweet. So yeah, I think it's a gradual process. I personally do. I won't bring refined sugar into my house. I just won't. So yeah, I do. I will use xylitol or maple syrup, and I prefer maple syrup to honey just because it doesn't have as much of a histamine effect. So some of my kids are a little bit histamine sensitive, so I'll do that. As in histamine, if it's quite high, it can kick off the immune system, and some people a little bit too high. But yeah, I would agree with you. I think, you know, it's definitely better to get away from refined sugars as much as possible and move slowly but surely towards them in their gradual form. If you are having xylitol or stevia or agave, just trying to wrap it in something, like, you know, if you've baked something, maybe putting a little bit of nut butter in it, or using a little bit of almond flour, or you know, you've got a bit of protein and fat in there as well, just to change how that's then releasing. You know, that all makes a really big difference as well.
For someone going through chemotherapy, is there anything you'd recommend that they avoid or take even? You know, what would you suggest for a patient who came to you with that question?
That maybe is not so commonly known.
You've got a low appetite,
yeah,
and feel a bit nauseous. What would you recommend?
A really big challenge, I would say. I mean, I would try and flood your body with as many polyphenols as possible. So like polyphenols are things like your flavonoids. So they give foods that really bright color. You know, like when you actually can stain your hands from food, that's because of the polyphenols, you know, like things like blueberries and your raspberries, and then your spices as well. So for example, cloves they're like, 15,000 milligrams per 100 grams of polyphenols. So that's super high. That's just cloves. And then if you compare it, just to give you some, you know, some perspective. So star anise is 5,000 milligrams per 100. And then, so that's quite different to 15,000, but it's still high. And then curry powder is 285 milligrams per 100. So, you know, even just in spices, cocoa is pretty high as well. For all the chocolate lovers out there, that's great to know. So it's not all doom and gloom. It really isn't. Like even coffee and tea are really high in polyphenols. What else did I put down? Your nuts and seeds, your olives and olive oil, your beans, obviously all your veggies. Artichokes are particularly high, red onions, and then your really colorful veggies as well, like your carrots, your butternut squashes, your sweet potatoes, your peppers as well, and then your fruits, obviously your peaches. Turmeric is good, but it's not quite absorbed. It's a little bit tricky for your body to absorb the curcumin out of it, but I would still try to include it anyway. So yeah, think about all those really bright colors, and you almost want to go for nutrient density where the food isn't going to make you feel really full, because like you said, you don't have an appetite. So that's where the challenge is. So even things like, you know, maybe nut butters, which were the nuts? So flax seeds are really high in polyphenols, and chestnuts are really high, and then almonds are quite good as well. So you could do things like, have some nut butters around the house, different ones that you can try, even grinding up flax seeds and adding it into a meal, because they're so high. You know, they're not going to make you feel full, but they pack a mighty punch of polyphenols. And then if you actually just are so exhausted and you don't feel like actually chewing food and then using energy to digest it, which I totally understand, then something like a smoothie where you go, right, where's that polyphenol list? Okay, I'm going to put frozen blueberries in there. I'm going to put flax seeds in there. I'm going to put some almonds or some almond butter in there. And you just get as much goodness as you can in there. And you could potentially put even a vegan protein powder in, because obviously when you're going through such an intense process, protein is quite important for that recovery. but obviously you don't want a protein powder that's full of the artificial sweeteners that have been linked to poor gut health, so to damaging your gut health. So looking for one like maybe the company Free Soul, where they use stevia in it. What's some of the other ones? Or Form. There's Form Nutrition as well. You have to look quite closely because most of them have, your sucralose and your aspartame, so really bad sweeteners. Or you could get Pulsin is another brand where I'm not linked to any of these brands, by the way, but they have good stuff, right? Pulsin is another one, and they do a non-flavored one. Some people might not like the taste of this sort of sweetened stevia ones. There's just no flavor in it. So you would more just taste what's in the actual smoothie. And I would say, avoid putting really high sugar fruits in there because you just don't need them. You don't need like bananas and stuff like that, really. You want to go more for your kind of those bright colored ones that are actually a bit lower in sugar. So you're not getting those higher insulin spikes. That would just be my recommendation. Obviously not giving individual advice, but yeah, overall, just kind of keeping your sugars as level as possible, getting enough protein in and getting as many nutrients as you can, but eating those nutrient-dense foods that don't necessarily make you feel really full. Like if you have a spoon of nut butter, you get so much in there and calories, which are needed, but you don't actually feel like really full and bogged down with it.
Would you recommend smoothies or juices?
Oh,
I remember because we started making smoothies and then we're told you would be better off doing it by juicing. Like you probably explain this better.
So at the start, we were trying to work out a lot of different things all at once. And one thing that came up a lot was preparation.
Yeah.
So one of the things that really came up was using blenders over cold press and blenders over slow press because of how it would strip fiber from certain, so as you blend it, it would get to a heat. So there's like this artificial heat that happens within a blender. And again, this was just a couple of things that we found. Things may have changed now, but that heat would strip real goodness out of like some of the really, so bananas would essentially just become sugar. Blueberries, if you did it to too much of a heat, you were stripping the fiber and the goodness out of it. So we went to a press, like a juice press.
Yeah.
We essentially just feed all the good stuff into the top of it. And it just comes out in in just a really nice juice.
Yeah.
We've found that's been like a really good way of sustaining natural iron levels with using spinach and kale.
Yeah.
But what would you say in terms of that sort of stuff, like that preparation?
Is there a significant difference, would you say, between
Yeah. So again, it does depend on the individual and what stage they're in. Like sometimes it might be so severe that juicing might be a good idea. But with juicing, all the fiber is taken, obviously. So only the juice is left. And you can see all that fiber at the back of the juice, like it's gone. So the thing with juicing is it is good because you get like the amount, right, that you put in there, you could never really eat all of that, right? So you're doing what you need to do in terms of you're flooding your body. Like I mentioned earlier, you are literally flooding it with as many nutrients as possible that you wouldn't have been able to eat, especially when you're exhausted on chemotherapy and you're not going to sit there munching through some kale and all the rest of 100 carrots. You're just not. So yes, it does help with the nutrient density and the amount that you're getting from those really good foods if you can pinpoint them. But the only thing is, if you have fruit that goes in, then you're stuck with that issue again, where there isn't any fiber to slow down the sugar release. So then you're going on that roller coaster again, where you're getting those spikes of blood sugar, and then your insulin has to rush out and get it out of your body because your body knows that that's a dangerous place to be. So for it to be sitting there with high blood sugar. So smoothies are great because that you don't lose any of the fiber. Yes, it gets pushed around and made smooth, but it's still all in there. I don't think the blenders you get now, I guess it depends which one you use, but I don't think they cause much heat. But I mean, I use a Thermomix for smoothies, and I use that because you can cook with it as well. So it's just really helped me save a huge amount of time. As in, you can literally make a prawn curry in there one night and then wake up in the morning and make your daily smoothie. Like it's brilliant. So, but that definitely, there's no heat when you're blending. Like if I make a smoothie with frozen berries, it's like freezing cold, and you can do like a healthy ice cream in there and things like that. So yeah, I am wary of heating things that are quite delicate and taking out nutrients from them. So I totally get where you're coming from. But I don't think, if you have a good blend, I don't think it should get too hot. I know with NutriBullets and things in the past, I don't use one anymore, but I know if you blended it quite a lot, you could actually, I think the smoothie would actually go a bit warmer. So, you just have to play around that and be wary of that. But I would say the main difference is that the smoothie does contain the fiber, the juice doesn't. But that doesn't mean that like one of them is bad. It's more just, what are we using it for? Is this person in a place where they're actually so ill and devoid of nutrients that they actually just need so many nutrients, as many as possible, without them having to actually digest it as well because they're so tired? Is that actually what they need for a few months? Yeah, maybe. But then we can't like pump it up with fruit, because then that's going to cause those blood sugar imbalances and spikes and falls. So then it's sort of like, okay, what can we do? Make veggie juices. Maybe with a tiny touch of fruit, or maybe eat the fruit separately. And you can even use the fiber that's left over and make it into something, or bake something with it as well. So you are actually getting the fiber, but just at a later time. So your body, you're getting a hit of loads of nutrients that are really easy to absorb all in one, which I think, your body would be really grateful for. So it just depends on what stage the person's at and how they're doing and how they're feeling, and then just applying what might work best at that point, and maybe a mixture, maybe some juices, some smoothies.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Like we were saying before, the advice isn't there. Like if you can scour the internet, but then you do find things that will contradict, or and it becomes hard because it's a balancing act.
Mm-hmm.
And like you just said, like one paper could say juices are better than smoothies, the other one will say smoothies are better than juices.
Yeah.
Actually, you could facilitate both.
Exactly.
And it have actually a better result instead of it taking sides.
Yeah, why does it always have to take sides? And it is literally about, you can't say which one's better. You can't, unless you've got the person standing in front of you who you're saying it's better for. How can you say it's better? Because it's supposed to be client-centered. It's not supposed to be like, to me, it's just so random. It's like there isn't really a good food or a bad food per se, because a tomato might be great for you and it might kick off my immune system. So it doesn't really matter that it's got fiber and vitamin C and all this good stuff if it doesn't work for me, but it works for you. So it just depends on how we're applying it to the person and what we're hoping to achieve, like what outcome and how long for, and what's actually going in there. You can get a really harmful juice that's pumped full of like banana and strawberry, is just going to make your blood sugar go so high. Or you could get one that's like got celery and spinach and lemon and, all that good stuff in it, which is going to be totally different. Yeah.
So you're originally from South Africa.
Yes.
You live here in England, vastly different culturally, and you'll have different beliefs around nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Coming into somewhere like England where it's not as valued, was there a vast cultural difference between South Africa and England? And if so, what were they? And what were maybe some of the themes that you found quite, different?
Yeah, I just remember arriving here and just seeing all this marketing everywhere that I looked, with like all this food on it, like bad food, in my face. I literally, and I fell for it, at first. I was like, oh, what's a Snickers bar? Let me try this. And like, getting slightly addicted to that. I can't believe now, you would never believe the stuff that I used to eat compared to now. Like I wouldn't go near it. I just don't want to, So, but yeah, I remember just thinking, wow, that is awful for people where they're walking around, they're really hungry, they're really stressed, and then they're just constantly. And then I remember, when you're going to pay and there's like all these sweets and all this stuff right next to you as you're walking up to the aisle, and just looking at the back of things and going, oh my gosh, this, cereal, which isn't great anyway, but it's like got so much more sugar in it than I remember seeing in South Africa, just a kind of like a disconnect. In South Africa, there's a lot of farming and farms, and there's a lot of farmers markets and farm stalls, they're called, where you can like actually see the real food. So yeah, and actually I would say I had struggled in South Africa because I was still eating things that didn't work for me unknowingly, like muesli with milk and, loads of gluten and dairy. And I just didn't know that doesn't work for me as an individual with my thyroid predispositions. But then, then when I came over here, I suddenly was like, okay, now I really don't feel well. So there was definitely a difference in the food here. Like, I don't know if it's more processed or there is just more sugar in a lot of packaged foods. It did feel quite different culturally, and a lot more like pushing convenience food, which I don't think is right at all.
I've got a question. So I'm vegetarian. Do you think that can have a negative impact on someone with cancer? Are you better getting like more iron, say from like meat, or is there a way to balance it?
Well, the research actually shows that a vegetarian diet is great for somebody with cancer or recovering from cancer. So, I just don't believe in I would never say like this is the right diet for everyone ever, even though I think meat is great and it's, it helps with blood sugar balance and all the rest of it. It doesn't mean, there's nothing wrong with different diets for different people, because we are all so different. And like I said, the research does point to better outcomes with a vegetarian diet. And I think as well, you just get, it depends what type of vegetarian diet, right? You could eat a really poor, unhealthy vegetarian diet, which you're obviously not doing. So, but if you're doing what you're doing, you're eating a really healthy vegetarian diet, you are flooding your body with nutrients all the time, because you're eating loads of veggies, loads of fiber, herbs, nuts and seeds, legumes, whole grains, some fruit, so, and you're just not overloading your system. You're making it really easy for your body, because you're eating foods that are really easy to digest, and then they're full of fiber to feed your gut microbiome, which is how your immune system fights back. So you are doing the right thing when you look at, okay, I'm doing this, and what is it doing? Oh, it's supporting my gut, which is where my immune system is, so that I don't have any relapse of anything, and it's full of nutrients, which I need. I need a lot of support. I need my body to be flooded with nutrients, and I'm not eating meat. Yeah, meat is quite hard to break down. You might not have the energy. It takes a long time to recover from these massive processes like this. So I think that's the right thing for you at this point in time. It doesn't mean that it's not going to change. But yeah, I think you can get enough iron from plant foods if you're able to absorb it. You might need to supplement, but there's nothing wrong with that. Supplements, targeted supplements are such a game changer if you get them correct for your needs. So yeah, I don't think it's a problem at all. I think you can get enough iron, and if you're struggling, you just take a supplement to help boost it up.
I think supplements is a good area to cover, really. So I think that there's such a multitude that you can take in general. Like, I think I take 20 different ones, which is nuts. But for me, it was prescribed by a clinic I went to, and then as we've gone on, added when we've heard it could be good for us. I know you did just kind of cover it, but do you think it's better to get it from the food, or a supplement's just a very good alternative, especially again, if you're on chemo and you don't have an appetite, it might be a lot easier to take a pill and still get goodness from it.
I think you have to do both. I know people won't be happy with me for saying that, because everyone wants the easy fix, but I really think you have to do both.
Okay.
And I think, when we go through disease processes, or we have a predisposition to a thyroid disease or cancer or a different type of disease, we do need a lot of support, and I think within the lifestyles that we live in now, they're not actually, let's be honest, it's not how we were designed. We weren't supposed to live with this much stress. So in that case, it's like, okay, reality check, this is what we're living in. So what do we do? Okay, we make ourselves more resilient. That's what we have to do if we're going to like survive it and manage to still have a good life within this kind of situation where there's like toxins everywhere, there's huge amounts of stress. Yeah, you know, you've got to give yourself as much support as possible. And I do believe that most people will need at least one supplement, if not more, depending on what they're trying to support. You know, they might have a family history of IBS or something, or thyroid disorders or something like that. You want to look into that and start looking at prevention. You know, what can nutrient deficiencies can often really fuel and sometimes even trigger disease processes. So it is about looking at your levels and testing them regularly and figuring out, okay, what do I need to feel my best? And that doesn't mean you're going to take that supplement for the rest of your life, but it's more like you cycle through phases of, you might be taking that for a period of time, and then you might take that one out and put a different one in, almost like training cycles where you're not trying to do everything at once, but you're like cycling them in and out to make sure all your needs are being met. And the thing that you're focusing on at that time is what's being focused on, and then kind of moving on to something else. Almost like when you're training, you can't, you know, be like the best sprinter and the best weightlifter. You just can't. You have to like choose what you're going to do for a period of time and then change again. So yeah, I do think you do need to get nutrients from food. You can't be sort of like replacing food with supplements at all, because there's so much goodness that is really needed from the food. But I do think a lot of us, you know, our gut health isn't the best because of stress and loads of other things. So we might not even absorb as much as we should be. And certain diseases might cause us to absorb less or to require more. And stress often gets us to cycle through vitamins and minerals faster. Like we go through magnesium and B vitamins at a much faster rate when we're stressed. So a lot of us will then need to replenish that. So for me, in my experience, you know, once you get a person on the supplements that work for them at that time, it's totally a game changer. But they do need to be making an effort with their diet as well, which it's not easy when you're exhausted and you're going through things. So, but the good news is there are ways to make that as easy and basic as possible. There really are. And we're lucky with that now, with how many different foods we can get that actually are healthy, but they're also quite convenient. So there's always a way to make it work and make it the least stress inducing as possible.
I think it's important that this is a message not just for people going through cancer. Like you said, it's like you can not avoid it, like that's quite a bold statement, but you can cater to your needs now before you have to fall into that horrible situation.
Yeah, like
this isn't just for when you need it. You know,
prevention is so important. Like just trying to because there is a high risk, you know, for diseases in the world that we live in now, because it isn't how we should be living. It's not how we should be eating. It's just nothing that should be. So, I think we all should be looking at prevention, even if we have already had a disease or we're going through one. We should still be looking at prevention because we want to prevent another one or prevent a relapse, or you know. So I think it is really important to look at that prevention piece. I think it's really overlooked.
Yeah. So I know the statistics went up. So I was diagnosed 5 years ago, and during my treatment after, so I'd maybe guess 3 or 4 years ago, the statistics went up for 1 in 3 people getting cancer to 1 in 2. And we actually questioned our doctor about it, and his reasoning was that the population's getting older and that's why. And I actually think that's not the case at all.
You're seeing more cases of younger cancer.
Yeah.
So
and I think that's probably to do with the drinks that's on, like, you know.
What are you exposing people to?
Yeah, like.
And you were saying before about how, like, this prevention.
As I said before, you know, highly intelligent people, and you just sort of ask yourself, how is this happening? Like, it just feels like a major failure on the human race. You know, like how could we allow this to happen? It's really sad, and I think vitamin D is actually a hormone. Like it runs so much about you, like you said, your ability to pay attention, your mood, but so much more, and your immune system, and you could go on and on about vitamin D, like it's so important. But then on top of it, those people probably also, they might come from backgrounds where they don't have as much money. So then on top of it, they might be eating all the foods that are not helpful to their learning either, that are damaging their gut microbiome. So that's actually a double whammy, isn't it? And then if they are living in that impoverished environment, there's going to be a lot more stress as well. Their parents are going to be more stressed. They're going to suffer because of that. So then that's like a triple whammy, and it's just like, it's not fair. It shouldn't be happening.
Well, yeah, you talk about that afford and like being able to afford that type of like correct nutrition. I've just come back from the supermarket. It's cheaper for me to buy 6 bottles of Coke than it is 6 bottles of water.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Like that is absolutely ridiculous. And we're in a position to buy bottled water, but also you look at some of the water and infrastructure problems within the UK and what people actually, I would tell everybody to filter their water.
At the moment, especially
what's going on in Devon.
Yeah, and all the processes, all the old pipes, all the chemicals, all the metals that are in these things.
Yeah. Well, they've said you should boil your water which is, for a first world country, that is quite scary that they're actually admitting that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we use a water distiller, which is quite intense because it's just like takes everything out. But yeah, I would recommend some kind of filtration system. Definitely, I wouldn't say boiling it is going to be quite enough. But yeah, it's
we use like a jug, but it just shows like the fact that you're willing to sell people 6 bottles of Coke rather than 6 bottles of water.
Yeah,
it shows where the money's getting thrown and where the money's being lined. Because again, a lot of these sugar companies, you even look back to the end of World War II and the stuff that they did with corn syrup and things like that. It's horrendous. Like, and then it becomes a cultural. So like Coca-Cola and all those types of brands have made themselves part of the culture.
Yeah.
So they sponsor major sports teams and major sporting events. Even like you look at more recent examples of these prime drinks. Absolutely ridiculous to be able to sell that as a sugar-free drink.
Yeah.
So stupid.
Because no sugar doesn't mean no badness.
But
terrible sweeteners that damage your gut health.
But there'd be kids that will go to school with your eldest, and I think this fad has passed, but it was all about what different types of prime you could have.
Oh yeah.
And you're just like, oh my God, like.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Their marketing, as I said, it's everywhere, right? It's so big in your face, these big, so kids they just fall for it because they haven't developed that brain reasoning and differentiation enough to actually, it is cruel because it puts kids in a position where, there's not a lot going on in their lives. So they're looking for things to.
And there's no one to tell them how bad it actually is for them.
No, they have no idea.
It's also like, and it happens generationally. Like, I remember playing basketball and it would be a thing to have a Gatorade because everybody drank Gatorade. Like all your NBA heroes and all the other guys that you would see on TV drank Gatorade. When actually I should have been drinking bottles of water. Yeah. That would have truly helped my performance. Definitely. Not the thing that's sold to me by Michael Jordan or sold to me by the All Blacks. Like those drinks have their position if you're training 5 days a week. Normal people shouldn't be ingesting them just after going to the park.
No.
Or like if you go and work out for an hour and a half, that might have a place there, but you'd have to be doing that 3 to 4 times a week for it to really take any impact on you.
Exactly. What else is in there, and like you could get the same benefit from having a different drink and maybe a better one that's still, it might have some sugar in it or whatever it is, but it doesn't need to have all the other stuff in that's actually damaging. So it's about being bold enough to just go, do you know what, I'm not doing that, like, and questioning it and just going, why are we doing this? Like, how paradoxical is that? You've got Coca-Cola sponsoring like high performance sporting events, and you've got terrible, detrimental food being served in hospitals and at school. Like, it's not okay.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
completely.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and it's such a also that shows a value, like where your values are set as a society in terms of your health. It's funded by the marketing. It's funded by what that company can contribute to that event, not so much in terms of like the message, but the actual monetary
100%
value.
It's unfortunate, I think, as well. Similar can apply in like the pharmaceutical industry, where they can make money off medicine and treatments, but not off natural plants. So that already puts a blockade on what could really help people's health.
It does, it really does. And it's about, seeing through that, all of that political, economical stuff, and just realizing why it's happening, so you can kind of get out of that whole system and not just be fed that information and just believe that it's true, because a lot of the time it isn't, unfortunately.
What's quite topical at the moment, I think, and I'd like for you to maybe like shine some light on this. At the moment, there's been a really resurgence in mushrooms and different types of mushrooms and different types of benefits from using those fungi. Like, we found, for example, in our experience, there was turkey tail and lion's mane that in Japan, they actually give that as a form of treatment. So when you go into their version of the NHS, they'll supply you with that type of treatment to help you if you're diagnosed with cancer. That's starkly different to, say, here, New Zealand, even I would assume in South Africa too. But could you speak upon maybe like that importance of that new revelation within the health industry, because it's becoming very popular, but again, with the same things with a lot of the nutrition stuff, people don't understand the importance of it.
Exactly. So mushrooms they have been shown to really support the immune system, which is what's needed, obviously, with things like cancer. So it really helps to provide a more resilient immune system that can actually fight back. So they're really useful for that. And they have been shown to suppress cancer cells. Certain mushrooms work better for different types of cancers. It's really interesting. And also to quicken recovery from chemotherapy even. And then with a lot of these mushrooms, they can have an adaptogenic effect. So an adaptogen is something like a mushroom or something like ashwagandha that has a cortisol sparing effect. So basically, it slows down how quickly and how much cortisol you produce in response to stress. So you might receive like a really stressful, rude email and be like, your body's just like, right, adrenaline, cortisol, you're angry, and you can't. You might not be able to help that. Like, that's how you feel, and that stuff is coursing through your veins, and that actually damages you on a physiological level. And a lot of people are feeling like that most of their day. But the cortisol has an effect on your blood sugar as well. So that can cause your blood sugar to spike and fall more if you're pumping out more cortisol. So you've then got a higher blood sugar, higher insulin, and like I said, that higher inflammatory environment, which is linked to causing diseases. So something like an adaptogen can change how you respond to stress. So you might receive that same email, but you just don't respond in as much of a stressful manner. So you then don't perceive it as so stressful as you might have, and then you produce the cortisol in a different way. Your body spares it, so it slows down how it releases, which means you then don't feel as stressed in response to it. So it's really quite amazing. So not only does that support you, as in it protects that stress resilience, that stress tolerance, which obviously has a huge protective effect on all of your body systems, but it also has that blood sugar piece where it helps to keep your blood sugar more controlled. So when you had like a major shock, right? And you have a major shock, and then you have a crash, right? And you're like, okay, I'm really hungry, I'm really thirsty, I'm really shaky, because that shock has actually affected your blood sugar. So it's quite amazing. Like when you look at the mechanism of action, there's multiple different actions that these supplements can be having. So if you apply them to the right person and with that condition that specific one has been shown to be helpful for, it's really powerful. So I definitely think, for me, I don't take mushrooms because they have an immune stimulating effect, and my immune system is way too overstimulated. So for me, I can get away with vitamin C and vitamin D and zinc and, quercetin. That's all great for my immune system. But I don't want to stoke it too much. So I don't have mushrooms, but they would be brilliant for a lot of people, especially if you need a more active immune system.
So is that, in a general sense, what your company does, like what you do for your patients or clients, I guess? So when they come, they talk to you about, their illness, their problem, and you guide them towards what's best for them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we have an initial conversation. We then would look at, okay, what data is the most important to retrieve first, so I can see what's actually happening on paper as for a fact. Mm-hmm. And then we can start to modulate. We can go, okay, so this is the body system that needs the most support right now. So let's start modulating and helping that body system to come back into a balanced state where it can communicate with other organs and it can reach homeostasis, basically. And literally guiding them towards, okay, this is the information we should try to get first. And then based on this information, this is how we should be eating. And these are the supplements that we should take. And then we should then retest in many months and then see what's changed and how you're actually feeling and what's changed in you that you've noticed. And then we go to the next step and try and get a bit more data. And slowly but surely, we get the body working much better.
I mean, that seems such a valuable service.
Yeah.
And it's something that isn't an option. When I was getting, I was having a trial up in London, and we asked if we could speak to a dietitian, and we had about a 5-minute meeting where she said, you've lost a lot of weight, so I suggest, eat more candy. Pretty much, wasn't it? It's ridiculous. And we were just sitting there like, this can't be what they're being told. Your service seems so useful.
Yeah, we went into this. So we went in, we booked this thing. It took 4 months to get the appointment. And then we keep coming back, making sure that we still had the appointment. We finally get in there. We had a list of questions. We had all these questions for this woman. And we get in there. She essentially didn't listen to anything we said. And then she said that Beth had dropped, I think she didn't even drop a lot of weight for someone who is very petite in stature. Beth's never been a big woman. So you're talking there was a difference in about 2 kilos. And again, it's a fair amount to lose, but it's something that we actually got back with hard work, with terms of using protein powders and
this was just
things.
After radiotherapy as well.
Yeah, this was very early on. Yeah. So she listened to, she didn't listen, but she heard us out, and then her response was, "Well, I would eat chocolate. Do you have a favorite type of chocolate?" And we were like, "Wait, hold on! That's full of really bad sugars.
Yeah.
Would you suggest maybe an alternate to that?" "Oh no. Especially if you like white chocolate. If you want to eat white chocolate, and that's the highest sugar content, highest fat content.
It doesn't even have the polyphenols in it." No.
Yeah. So and then it was what we couldn't believe it. And again, there were words said to her that I won't repeat, but it was essentially so frustrating that we were just that was our, we've spoken about this before, but that was our first initial thought of okay, we have to do this on our own.
Yeah.
We can't rely on the National Health Service to provide this, because when we have gone to them about this, that's bad advice. And again, trust your gut, ironically.
Yeah, exactly.
Trust in your gut, and then just being okay, we have to we have to do this on our own. Or we have we've found you as part of the Bloomsbury group because we know how vital your role is. This is such a huge thing that people aren't taking seriously and that people will breeze by, because unfortunately, when you're diagnosed with something a little bit crazy, whether it's high-end diabetes, cancer, whatever, one of the things that you find pleasure in is food. Of telling people how important this is. It sets the base.
Definitely. Because if you give them the knowledge and they really understand, then it is up to them in the end, that choice. But also if you give them ways to make it fun, you know, like we've been taking our daughter to pho, like the Vietnamese food place, since we were 6 months old, and feeding her the pho on the ladle, you know, and like just putting all that colorful different stuff in front of her. And she's 8 now. She's still obsessed with that place to this day. Like, she loves it. You know, it's not boring. It's fun. It tastes really good. And we can still bake stuff and make stuff that tastes really good. Like, she loves food so much, you know. So I think it's about just doing it gradually and showing people everything that they can eat, and just telling them, like, it doesn't have to be punishing. It can just happen naturally if you stop trying to make yourself stop, and you just focus on making sure you are getting enough of the good stuff that's actually going to help you fight back what you're fighting back at, and help feed your gut, which is where your immune system is. And you keep reminding them, like, as long as you're getting enough of the right stuff, which is, it's a lot that you need, then, you know, you might be able to have a few treats. They're not really treats, are they, if they're damaging your body? But, you know, I do understand it. But also your taste buds, like I mentioned earlier, they do actually change. And so it's not as hard as it seems. And sometimes, depending on the person and the issues they have wrapped up with food and things, it can just take a little bit longer, and you might have to be a bit more patient and kinder to them, but they can get there. And there isn't any point in trying to just do all of it at once and stop everything right now if it is quite emotional and stress related. So then you might have to go a slightly different way and go a little bit more slowly. But I absolutely do not believe that food should be like horrible and not taste nice and not be enjoyable. It's the opposite experience that I've had, even though I eat really, really healthily. I'm the same as my daughter. I absolutely love food. Like, you know, so
it's that shortcut too, like we spoke about before, about preservatives and things like that are added to food. That the reason that they're there is because they're cheap and they make things last, and they're bad for the body, but they're good for a pocket. You know, they're paying someone. So when it comes to eating healthy, I think that message of, guys, this isn't going to suck. It's just going to be. It's just going to be more expensive, which some people aren't in that position,
especially at the moment.
That is not okay. Not fair.
It's not fair. But on that note, you can. It is doable. It is.
There are ways. Exactly.
There's definitely, in terms of like you say, making it yourself. And I think something you just spoke upon there, where your daughter has a natural happy response to a Vietnamese pho place. If you talk to most kids, like I'm a kid from the 90s, I bet you they get that same feeling from McDonald's. So like it's about building habits. It's about understanding that, like, and replacing that happy feeling with a more healthy one that you get that same physical response from. Then going
that association where you're there with people that you love, and and also just exposure and opportunity, like giving people the chance to go to these places. Like, lots of kids, they've never been there, so their taste buds are probably more used to really salty, starchy things. It's going to take some time, but you can do it. You just need to do it gradually. With kids, definitely, and with adults, often a gradual approach is better. Definitely.
We're just big kids, so
exactly.
It's one of those things. Like, it's, and again, I think that's a good response to have too. Like, for anybody that's trying to change these habits and trying to do these things in the right way, we are just big kids. We learn, we adapt. We just don't maybe take it on as quickly as the little ones do.
Yeah, you can see the transition that you can make, though, even though it seems so scary. Like, you guys know that already. Just when you look back and you think, I thought I wouldn't be able to do that, and now I don't want to eat that. I have no desire, you know. It's hard to believe when you're in it and you're like making the changes, but it's so worth it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I am very easily accessible on Instagram, actually. Just Beyond Balance is my name on there. And I, as we mentioned, I specialize in thyroid and gut health. And a lot of the work I do is around modulating the immune system. And then my website is slightly more thyroid focused. So it's thyroidthrivers.com. And yeah, you're welcome to drop me I think they could grab my email address through the site, couldn't they, if they wanted to drop me a message, or even a DM on Instagram, or contact on the website is fine as well. Whatever works for you guys.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to just talk everything through, and I hope it'll be helpful for people as well.
I'm sure it is. I feel like I've learned a lot.